Hey guys, Bored Now here, aka Keith, and this is my latest review of Euphoria, the HBO teen series created by Sam Levinson, which apparently is based on his own experiences. So this is episode 6, and it's called Fittingly the Next Episode. And this week it centres on really Christian, or McKay as he's sometimes known, and Cassie, their relationship in particular. So I'll start with them, and it's all kind of centred around this big sort of Halloween party and the characters who go to that dressed up as various things, and the fallout and what have you from the Halloween party. So the flashback at the start of the episode, which is something they've been doing every week for the last few, it's of Christian and his past growing up and his kind of route into football. And it kind of shows him as a more disciplined sort of character, not your stereotypical sort of jock. You know, when he is aggressive at football, his father takes him aside and says that's not the way to do it. You've got to channel that sort of thing. And we find out then Christian, he was kind of smart about things where he would put aside money and plan for the future. But I think the point the episode is making with Christian in these flashbacks and now in the current day is the fact that he then gets to high school, college, and he starts playing football, and he obviously has this dream of getting to the NFL and what have you, and suddenly he realised the competition is that much more intense. And as we have found out with him in the past episodes, he has been benched for most of the season. He has struggled to sort of break into the team, which is partly why he was considering focusing on other things anyway. So I think it's kind of trying to paint this sort of anti-American dream type message, or maybe even the fact that Christian is, an African American, maybe painting, then there might be slight sort of racism towards his prospects of making it in football in the big leagues. But yeah, it's sort of showing that Christian is one of the good ones. He's more disciplined and he bides his time and works hard, and yet the American dream still doesn't come true for him, or at least at this point he has hit a sort of a bump in the road, let's say. So, and he still gets overlooked for people who are probably in some cases not as talented. But anyway, that's the kind of message, the fact that he plays it by the book. And he still doesn't get the big break, essentially, at least not up to this point. But I think his more like subtle, more laid back characteristics, which we've seen in the episodes, and we've seen with his relationship with Cassie. He's actually the one who says to her, I don't want you to jump on me at every given moment. Our relationship should be more than just about sex. I think his, that subtler side to him than what we see in the other male characters in the show, or many of them anyway. I think it's sort of building up to what we see in this episode, sort of how it's kind of thrown back in his face, how he's embarrassed, and how essentially he is forced to be a more hyper masculine sort of typical jock male sort of thing. I think that's what it builds to in this episode. So we get more of him and Cassie. They go to the party, and I think there's a bit in his flashback where Christian is, it's not his voice, it's Rule's voice. She always seems to do the voiceover because she is kind of the lead of the show. But the voiceover is saying, then Christian doesn't understand why Cassie treats herself the way she does, why she doesn't respect herself, and it goes back to the fact that he's seen the video online, the pictures and all the rest of it. And another example is when they're about to go to the party, and she is kind of wore a revealing sort of outfit, and he actually suggests, well, no, it's Halloween, be a bit more playful, you don't have to sexualize yourself. And I mean, depending on your point of view, there is a school for out there, then actually it's the one night of the year girls do get to be a bit more slutty, if you like. But then, of course, in this show, yeah, it is very hyper-sexualized anyway, the characters. But Christian actually suggests and Cassie wears a football jersey, to be a bit different, a bit more playful. And the timelines get a bit muddled in this episode because at various points you do see her in more revealing sort of outfits, being more flirty. And I'm not sure if that's just in her head, if she's just imagining that, or whether she actually never wore the football outfit. I mean, that could be just Christian sort of fantasy, maybe because he's into football. But we get interesting sort of insights into him, the fact that he's kind of part of the reason he likes being with Cassie is he actually enjoys the fact that other guys look at her and want to be with her. But he essentially is the one who has her. He's the one who goes home with her. But anyway, they go to this party, and the guy from the previous episode, the guy who Cassie first got with in the fairground, is there, and when she was high and all that. And obviously in the last episode, she kind of set out these guidelines with him. She said, I have a boyfriend, we can't really be together again, or there can be nothing between us. And he sort of blackmailed her a little bit and said, if you go with me again sort of thing, then I won't reveal our secret type thing. So the impression was she agreed to that, because rather than having Christian find out. So yeah, they're not really seeing each other as a boyfriend-girlfriend, but, to sort of keep the secret, Cassie is agrees to whatever, make out with him, go with him. So he's at the party, and there's sort of flirtation there. And at one point they go off. And again, the timelines are a bit confused, because I'll mention another scene in a minute where Christian and Cassie leave together. And again, I'm not sure if part of this might be... Well, I think it definitely happens, but I'm not sure if it's supposed to happen originally and then they go back to the party, or if it happens later. The timelines are a bit confused in this episode. But anyway, I mean, most of the main characters are kind of, getting off with someone else at this party. And you get some really hyper music, again, some, drum and bass style music. Some really, stylized sort of montages. So ultimately Cassie does go with the other guy, and it's at the point where Christian hasn't arrived. And you get a bit more of Lexi in this episode, who hilariously is dressed as Bob Ross, who's like this painter who does... I mean, you've probably seen the clips of him. He paints various things on this TV show, or at least he did in the past. And it's a whole thing. I've only seen clips of it. I mean, and my introduction to it was in Peep Show, in one of the season 1 episodes, and I had no idea what it was, but it's just a bit in Peep Show. But CBS, apparently it gets mentioned, so quite a big thing in America. So Cassie is not Cassie. Lexi is doing the opposite of everyone else. Who are, well, they're not all so slutty. I mean, Kat is kind of like, she's dressed as like a nun sort of thing, and but it's all quite stylish. They're quite, Rule's outfit is quite stylish. So they're not all sort of slutty, but Lexi is going against the grain even more. So she's dressed up as Bob Ross. And there's a funny line from her mother, actually, when they're arguing about the costume. And her mother says, well, tell me how many teenagers dress as 50-year-old guys. So, yeah, so it's quite a funny line from her mother. But Cassie being different. So I keep saying the wrong word. Lexi being different, being all sort of cool. But the reason I mention Lexi is because she actually looks out for Cassie. Of course, they're sisters. So she texts her when Christian gets to the party. But there's no reply because Cassie is with the other guy. I think his name's Daniel, if I remember right from the previous episode. So they're together, they're starting up. They've been flirting at the party beforehand. And then Lexi, I think, must cotton on to what's going on. So as Christian is looking around the doors, trying to find Cassie, Lexi comes along and says, "Oh, she's left. If you're looking for her, she's gone home. She was tired or whatever." So again, we see this thing of covering for her. Lexi always being there for people. She's obviously been there for Rule. And we get a bit more of that in this episode. But essentially, she is this really good character who, even if people don't, because in this, Cassie going off with the other guy, it is really bad. She's treating Christian badly. And she doesn't really deserve to be covered for. But Lexi's that kind of character. She'll do it anyway. And the fact she's her sister, maybe. And it's a little white lies at the end of the day. She's probably thinking just as much about Christian's feeling, if he caught them. But then there's a whole other bit where Cassie, they go quite far, her and the other guy, and then she decides she can't go through with it because of Christian. And the other guy turns it around on her, says, this is twice you've done it to me. And he gets really nasty. I mean, surprise, surprise, he turns out to be a jerk as well. And he starts calling her boring, and he just says, well, if there's any guys who say they're with you for any other reason than to get off with you, then they're just lying. And she starts getting upset, and he's just really mean. He's really nasty to her. And it's this kind of scene where, obviously, without being crude about it, there is a truth to what he's saying, just because of how jerky guys can be. And certainly it seems to be true in his case. He doesn't seem to have any genuine feelings for her. But at the same time, obviously someone like Christian proves that there are good guys about who want to be with her for her sort of thing. It's not just a sex thing. But yeah, it's kind of no surprise that he turned out to be a complete jerk and turned it around on her. And then there's sort of this link at the party, because Kat has her guy, the one who's been pursuing her, and the one, again, he's set up as this ordinary, nice sort of guy. And actually, in his case, I think he probably is. He does seem quite sincere. But he comes up to Kat because he can't understand why she's been ignoring him. And she basically, she puts it straight to him, because this is Kat now in a very different place. She says, if you want if you want me to give you a blowjob, just say that. But if you want anything else, then she says something like, it's virtually impossible, we'll be boyfriend or girlfriend. And then they kind of start kissing, it starts up, and he kind of, I can't remember the exact line, he even hints or says, you know, he's a virgin. And then Kat, in this whole different sexualized, confident sort of place, kind of says, well, I don't have sex with virgins because they always get too attached, and I prefer a more experienced man. And again, I think this plays into the themes of the show, the fact that this then drives the other guy on, the fact he then gets more into it, he gets more confident, he gets a bit more aggressive, not overly aggressive, but he takes control, and Kat likes this. And yeah, they have sex, and it's and there's even a suggestion they could be a bit more than that, but whether that will happen, I'm not too sure. But he does actually genuinely seems like quite a down-to-earth, nice sort of guy who wants a proper thing with Kat. But I sort of raise it because, as I said, there is this connection, because nearer the end of the episode, when Cassie has had her thing and Kat's had her thing at the party, they lock eyes, as in Kat and Cassie's guy, the jerk guy. They lock eyes at the end and smile. And I'm not sure what that's about, whether it's just saying, you know, oh, the cycle continues, goes on. Kat goes on to the next guy. He goes on to a girl who is willing to actually have sex with him. That sort of thing. But yeah, their eyes do meet, and there's a certain sort of flirtatious look. Now, Rule and Jules in this... Oh, actually, sorry, I need to finish off the Christian side of the plot, because at one point him and Cassie do go back to a hotel room to have sex. And they start off, and basically these jock guys burst into the room. They're dressed in hoods. They're all shouting, being aggressive, and they pin Christian down. They pin him down. They start filming him. Obviously, he's either naked or semi-naked at this point, and they just embarrass him, and they obviously embarrass Cassie, who's shouting at them to get off him. And it's just this typical sort of obnoxious jock sort of prank sort of thing, and obviously they're going to post it online. And when they come out, you know, Cassie tries to console Christian, and he's actually crying. He goes into the bathroom, and this kind of completes the kind of arc with him in this episode, where he's embarrassed, and again it's this idea then he tries to do things the normal way. He tries to be a regular nice guy, and he continues to get shown up. He continues to get embarrassed. So it does bring out this more aggressive masculine side to him, because when he comes back out, Cassie's sort of got herself dressed, and he says, do you still not want to have sex with me? And she says, sorry. She says, yeah, of course I do, but, you know, because of the situation. And then he takes control. He's quite aggressive towards her. He turns her the other way and starts doing it, you know, from behind. And it's very aggressive. But it doesn't last. You know, he can't sort of go through with it. And so there's this idea then... I mean, maybe it's the fact that it's just not him, so it repulses him, or maybe he's just had his masculinity sort of broken down by what happened. But he doesn't actually go through with it, and they sort of go to sleep. But I think it is showing the fact that he's been pushed to a certain point, and suddenly the more aggressive, hyper masculine side comes out of him. So it's, I think, certainly from Christian's point of view, it's quite a worthwhile episode. Explore, because he is a different sort of character than a lot of the male characters in the show. So Rule and Jules are in very different places. Rule, who has been sober now for a while, is in a much more positive place. So they both go to the party, and Rule also makes amends with her drug dealer, her drug dealer friend, the one who refused to give her the drugs in the previous episode, and Rule had the breakdown. And he's just really cool about it. He says, he's level-headed as well, because he has a good line where he says, I don't take anything an addict says to me to heart, because I take it with a pinch of salt, because either way, they're saying they're loving me, but they're saying they're hating me, and they don't sort of mean it, sort of thing, which is a great way to look at it, and he's totally right, really. But Rule insists, no, it's important as a friend, and you forgive me, then I'm sorry, and he's cool about it, and they make up, and it is a nice sort of scene. And Rule at this stage is in a more positive place, but it's the opposite of Jules, who, because of, I think, Rule's reliance on her and the pressure there, has started going into a shell and started acting out of character. She's got very drunk at this party and is sort of just acting up in general. But it's also revealed the previous night what happened with Nate, and Nate essentially has blackmailed Jules. We get a little bit of Nate in this episode, then he's checking up on Jules and Maddie, and he's still seeing Maddie once a week at this hotel room. But he basically hatches a plan to make this whole thing with Maddie go away. And what he does is he bursts in on Taylor, and he blackmails him. He's got something on him, so he blackmails him into going and confessing to the police that it was him who assaulted Maddie on the night of the fairground. And at the same time, he's printed off this picture of Jules, this revealing picture, and he's obviously got stuff. I mean, he's sort of claimed all along that he can turn things around on her, because the evidence with their interactions, it wouldn't trace back to him, but it would trace back to her, essentially. But now he's got this revealing picture of her he's printed off. And he says, basically, go to the police, back up my story, say that it was it's either Taylor or Ty. I think it's Taylor. Say that it was Taylor who assaulted Maddie that night. Say that you saw it, sort of thing. Otherwise, I can make your life hell with this picture and all that. And again, it's a little bit contrived, because you sort of think, well, there's only so much she would go along with, and wouldn't she just take the chance and just, either stay out of it or just tell the truth. But in any case, we know these are vulnerable characters. They're, so yeah, I guess it's credible enough. But this has happened the previous night, so essentially, and the police officer is suspicious of this, because there seems to be quite a decent suspicion than it is Nate. But obviously Maddie is backing up his side of the story. He's now blackmailed Taylor into coming forward, and Jules has been blackmailed into backing up that side of the story. So that's all happened the previous night. So Jules is in a really bad place, and she's acting up. And so things seem to be on a downward spiral with her and Rule, even though Rule's trying to be there for her. And Lexi at the same time is being there for Rule. So again, we're seeing maybe this idea, I think it was in the previous episode, of this long-term friendship where there was a time apart. But Lexi is this always solid figure who's always there for Rule. Whereas, maybe Jules is just a flash in the pan. I think it is touching on that very relatable thing. Where, you have this person who you think is amazing, you think this is the real deal, but yet there's someone there who's always been there and probably always will be there, and that's kind of Lexi for Rule. And I have to say, the scene of the episode, which is a really funny scene, is Lexi and Rule playing good cop, bad cop. So Rule sees her sister again getting high with this guy. I think it's probably the same guy from the fairground. And so she and Lexi, she drags the guy aside into another room, and she's really aggressive, but it's done in a really comical way where she starts talking about, do you know some of the people you meet in the joint, some of the bad dudes? And she's kind of putting it on him then, if you do anything illegal with my sister and you end up in the joint, they're gonna, mess you up real bad and all that sort of stuff. And it's a really funny sort of scene because she's really into it and really playing a part almost just to freak this guy out. And on the other hand, Lexi's in the room and she's playing the good cop side of thing, which I guess Lexi would. She would be a bit better at that. But it's a really great scene, and it's funny, and it's because, there's a lot of black humour in the show, but I guess you don't always get this legitimately funny sort of humour, which is also quite playful. And another reason it's a nice sort of scene is because essentially Rule, she actually doesn't discourage the guy from going out with her sister because, her sister is that sort of age, and she just scares the shit out of him sort of thing, and makes it clear to him, you're not doing anything illegal with my sister, now go and hold hands with her or whatever she says. So it's a nice sort of scene. It's very funny, but I like that scene a lot. So I guess it's an okay episode. I still have some of the frustrations, but it's a pretty solid episode. It's a different place we see Rule in, which I quite like, and Lexi's getting a bit more involved, which I think is good. So I think it's a solid episode overall. Not great, but pretty solid. Some interesting stuff in there. So that is episode 6 of Euphoria. Just a couple more to go in this season. I'm still a bit lukewarm on it, whether I'll continue covering it after this season, but there's certainly enough in there at the moment for me to at least do this one season. But let me know your thoughts on it in the comments below. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and keep checking the channel for more TV reviews. But that's it for now. Thank you. Goodbye.